Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I'm the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. Now, before we get into the video this morning, I want to remind you of my brand new book that is on introductory special price for the rest of December 2023, U.S. orders only. I cannot give this introductory price after December 2023. All right. So go to my website, donkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com. Click on the banner right at the very top. The regular price of this book is $25.95 plus $7.95 shipping. All right. Order the book now. Total delivered price, $22.95. So you're going to save over $12. And again, let me thank you so very, very much for the wonderful response to the introduction of this book. I really, honestly appreciate it so very much. All right. So we're continuing our summary overview, reiteration in many instances, but adding some new material as we go along of the Olivet Discourse. Yesterday, I shared with you how Jesus used the terminology, the coming of the Son of Man. That is an incredibly important terminology. As some scholars that I cited yesterday point out, that is drawing directly on Daniel 7:13 and 14. Daniel 7:13 and 14, to reiterate, is the only Old Testament passage that speaks of the coming of the Son of Man on the clouds of heaven. It's the only one. That's why scholars admit and agree that in Matthew 24:29 and following, Jesus is drawing on Daniel chapter 7. That means he's likewise drawing on Daniel chapter 7 in Matthew chapter 24, verse 37, and again in verse 38, verse 39. And you see, he continues this discussion of the coming of the Son of Man. If you didn't catch the power of it yesterday, you've just got to catch the power of it, folks. The only Old Testament reference to the coming of the Son of Man on the clouds is Daniel 7. Daniel 7 is cited in Matthew 24, where Jesus is predicting his coming in the judgment of Old Covenant Israel. But Matthew chapter 24, verse 37 and verse 38 use the same reference for Jesus' coming in judgment. The hermeneutical question once again becomes, where's the justification for saying, as most partial preterists do, what is the hermeneutical justification for saying, yes, verse 29 to 31, that's the coming of the Son of Man on the clouds of heaven in judgment of Old Covenant Israel in AD 70. That has been the view of Matheson, Gentry, DeMar, on and on. Sariah, Jordan takes that position. Okay? So where do we change? Coming of the Son of Man, AD 70, coming of the Son of Man, supposedly at the end of time. Now, notice that Matthew chapter 24, verse 37 says, as it was in the days of Noah, so it shall be at the coming of the Son of Man. And he describes as it was in the days of Noah. As in the days of Noah, they were eating, they were drinking, they were marrying, they were giving in marriage, and they knew not until the flood came and took them all away. You know, in my younger years, I used to hear people talk about, the rapture, the rapture, the rapture. That's when people are taken from the earth. Well, when you examine that terminology of taken away versus left behind, let me just say this, a couple of things right here. Point number one, the imagery of being taken away is almost invariably a reference to warfare. Goes all the way back to the book of Chronicles, in which the Babylonians came into the land of Israel, conquered Jerusalem, and took away the prettiest, the wisest, the healthiest, the smartest, etc., and left behind the poor, the sick, the degenerate, etc. That's the Hebraic thought behind being taken away. Well, listen, folks, right here in Matthew chapter 24, the being taken away is not a good thing either. Because they were eating, drinking, marrying, giving in marriage, and did not know. What do they not know? Well, let's see. Well, anyway, they did not know until the flood came and took them all away. What did the flood do to those who were going about their everyday lives, refusing to know the commandment of Noah? Who was that? Oh, it was the unbelievers. It wasn't Noah and his family. The flood didn't take them away. Do you see the problem here of ever trying to interject into Matthew 24:37 and following the concept of a rapture for salvation? It just doesn't work. Now, notice it says, when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them. Well, that's the concept. Let me read verse 38 and following. Boy, I'm still having a problem with my eyes. This is crazy. Okay, so I have to do this to get my right eye to work. Okay, and they knew not until the flood came and took them all away, so also shall the coming of the Son of Man be. What coming? Coming of the Son of Man. Where do we find the coming of the Son of Man? Verse 37 and verse 30 and 31. Same coming of the Son of Man. Then two shall be in the field, the one shall be taken, the other left. Two women shall be grinding at the mill, the one shall be taken, the other left. Watch therefore, for you know not what hour your Lord does come. And what are they going to do? Well, number one, let me emphasize this. Who's he talking about? Who was it that did not know? It's the unbelievers. And someone might object and say, well, Preston, Noah and his sons preached for what we believe to be 120 years. Why didn't they know? It's because they didn't believe. Did they know that Noah was preaching? This crazy guy with a boat in his backyard? Did they know that he was telling them a flood is coming? They never saw a flood before. They never seen rain before. So what in the blue blazes is this idea of a flood? They knew all this, but can't you imagine some of the conversations of the people that heard Noah preaching? You need to come help me build this ark because God's going to bring a flood on the earth. That's that crazy Noah dude. They better stay away from that dude, No telling what he's liable to do. He might go postal, to use a modern term. I mean, how ridiculous was the story? And so what did they do? Well, to use the terminology of 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, now concerning that day, brethren, you have no need that I teach you anything, because you know perfectly well that the day of the Lord comes as a thief in the night. For when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them. Folks, that's Paul drawing directly on Matthew chapter 24. Directly. And again, most scholars acknowledge that. So who are they who did not know? It was the they who were going to hear the gospel when it was preached into all of the world declaring the imminent destruction of Old Covenant Israel, the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple, as that message, as Jesus said, this, and it's literally this gospel, it's very emphatic. This gospel of the impending destruction will be preached into all of the world as a witness to the nations. Then comes the end. What end? The end that the apostles asked about, the end of the age. Let me ask my question again that I pose so often. What age did the temple represent? Didn't represent time, didn't represent the Christian age. It represented the Old Covenant age of Israel. So here's Jesus saying, I'm going to give you some signs of the coming end. This gospel will be preached into all the world as a witness to the nations. Then comes the end of the age. But you see, as that gospel was preached, and it went to the Jew first and then to the Greek, what happened? Well, Acts chapter 13 shows us that when Paul went into the synagogue of Antioch of Pisidia and he preached Jesus, most of them did not believe. They scoffed. Jesus, this guy that was crucified, he's a sinner for crying out loud. He's a criminal for crying out loud. And you're telling us he's the Messiah? And so Paul warns them, beware, you scoffers. Beware lest that come upon you, which was written by the prophets. And he quotes Habakkuk about the coming destruction of Jerusalem in BC 586. And now Paul is saying, you know what? Those of you who are scoffing at my word, better beware lest that come upon you that came upon Jerusalem in 586 BC. Just as Habakkuk said, behold, I work a work in your days. I work a work of wonder, just as Isaiah said, that a man would not believe it, even if it was told to him. Paul's warning the Jews in Antioch of the coming destruction. And by the way, very, very quickly, I have people all the time contact me and they say, listen, Preston, of what concern would the destruction of Jerusalem be to people in Antioch, to people in Rome, in Corinth, in Athens, those places hundreds of years away, miles, excuse me, hundreds of miles away. I had a formal debate with a Church of Christ minister named John Welch, 2013, I think, somewhere along in there. And he gets up and he had a chart. Well, Athens and Corinth, 800 miles away from Jerusalem. Why would anyone care? The Romans wouldn't care. The Athenians wouldn't care. The Corinthians wouldn't care about the destruction of this troublesome Jewish city set in the middle of nowhere in Judea. Who cared? I literally could not believe the lack of thought that went into that argument. Argumentum ad desperatum. So I got up and I said, well, Brother Welch says who would have cared? Because after all, Rome and Corinth and Athens and Galatia, Ephesus, blah, 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 hundreds and hundreds of miles away. I said, well, let's consider this. The crucifixion, the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus was something like 8,000 miles away from you and me as we are right here in America. Why in the world, therefore, should I care about what happened in that far-flung, rebel-rousing city of Jerusalem 2,000 years ago? After all, it's 8,000 miles away. And I got to tell you, folks, there was an electric shock went through that audience. The building was full. There were probably 250 people there for that debate. I saw people turn to one another and go, They knew that his argument was ridiculous. Listen, more people knew, listen carefully to me, more people knew about the fall of Jerusalem. The fall of Jerusalem immediately impacted socially, economically, politically, impacted more people, and again, immediately, than did the crucifixion, death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. Now, don't anybody misunderstand what I just said. The story of the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ still resonates today. And it touches our heart, touches us to the very core of our being. Nothing is more important than the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. But do you get the point? You see, the old covenant, the ministry of sin and death, was supposed to pass away so that the ministry of life and righteousness could come into reality. Eusebius, 4th century church historian, made an amazing comment years and years and years and years ago, and again in the 4th century. He said the gospel of Jesus Christ was preached into all of the world. When it was fully established, Jerusalem fell and was destroyed. And at that moment, the new covenant came into full effect. If you want the quotation, contact me, I'll give it to you. Do you get the point here, folks? Even ancient writers realized the passing of the old, the end of the old, was the full bloom of the new. All right? But the Jews didn't believe it was coming. They refused to believe. And thus, they did not know until the flood of destruction in AD 70 took them all away at the coming of the Son of Man. All right? Thanks for joining me. We got more. I'll see you on the flip side.